I'm going to try to explain to you my thoughts on the nature of reality, and I have attempted to pre-organize my thoughts before this video, but there are no guarantees that this is going to be any bit organized. So I'm going to start from the place where many psychedelic experiences peak, and that is oneness. So I believe on the ultimate level that all is one, that this is the true nature of reality. And this eternal oneness is in essence God. It's everything. It's the entire universe and everything in it throughout all of time and all dimensions, and it's also you. But before we get too much into that, let's go back just a little bit and let's think about a more fundamental question, and that is, why is there something rather than nothing? And this is kind of where my mathematical perspective might sneak in a little bit, but let's just assume that there was nothing, absolute nothingness, only the void, zero information, zero distinctions. Now, what if I told you that this state of zero information actually implied all information or all solutions? It's something that I intuitively understand, and the best way that I can understand it is through a metaphor. And I don't know if any of you have ever played Sudoku, but if you have, you'll know that if you looked at a blank Sudoku board and there was no pre-given numbers, that would imply all solutions. So this is the best way I can explain this idea, but I'm going to get a little bit more further in depth and maybe connect it with some other ideas that a lot of psychonauts are pretty familiar with, so we'll get more into that. But more or less, what I'm saying is the universe, the entirety of everything emerges from the void, is implied by it. That's the key word. It's implied by it. They exist together. They imply each other. They can't be separated. So this is where I'm going to bring in another idea that I think a lot of psychonauts are familiar with. And I know some of you have probably heard about Alan Watts. And when he talks about polarity and he talks about this concept of things implying each other. And the big example is figure background. And the idea is that there is no such thing as background without figure, figure without background, that these two things imply each other. And it's sort of an idea that like once you get, but I think it can be hard to get at first. But I also think that it's very consistent mathematically. So this is another reason why I lean towards this idea, beyond just having direct experiences with oneness and direct experiences, like realizing how, in a way, like opposites can imply each other. Anyway, I don't want to go too much onto that, and I want to focus. Let's get back onto the nature of reality. So let's ask another question. What is reality on the fundamental level? Like, what is it? And by this, I mean, is it matter or is it something else? I think reality is made of something more like information, or at least something similar to what we think of as information. And I don't think that this means that it's physical. I think maybe some people could think of information as physical, but I think some information is actually very peculiar in that and this is sort of my own idea, but I'm sure it's somebody else's idea too, but this is the way I see it. I see information as kind of having this built-in duality of this object component and this subject component. And, the object component, like that's the object of knowledge, the object of information. The subject component is the knower, the observer of the knowledge, the known. And that this, maybe it kind of exists in a superposition, this information. And at some point it splits into the known and the knower. But that split is really an illusion. The fundamental nature is that they're the same. I don't know if you follow, but this is kind of how I think about the fundamental nature of reality. I think it's something like information, like a digit, like a number. But a way that I like to describe it actually is, I think reality is made of patterns. Like just pattern. Reality is made of patterns. You could call it information, but I think pattern kind of gives this more like abstract idea to it that is more accurate. Like, it's not necessarily a solid thing. Like, a pattern isn't an object, but it is also something. It's also something tangible. It's also something you can measure. It's also there. And this is what I think the fundamental nature of reality is. I don't think it's physical, but I'm going to get a little bit more into what I think about consciousness. I do have ideas that focus more on consciousness being kind of like the fundamental underlying nature of reality. So I will talk a little bit about that. But if we don't think about that too much, I still don't think reality is physical. I think it's something like mathematical. Like, there's this higher mathematical reality, and physical reality is just a special case of this larger mathematical reality. I wanted to go back a little bit more to the idea of polarity, the idea of oneness. So we have the ultimate reality of oneness, which I talked about, which is the eternal oneness of simultaneously everything / God and the void. It's the simultaneous, oneness that they imply each other. And from that is everything. And here's the main idea. Out of this oneness, reality is created by the differences. Reality is made by the realization of the differences between things. And this is probably heavily influenced by psychedelic experiences and having experiences of oneness. And then, what happens at the edges of those experiences of oneness, where things start piecing themselves back together. This is directly relevant to those experiences where you come out of oneness and reality comes together piece by piece. It's made by the differences. I don't know if you get this. Like, reality is made by the realization of the differences. And this is kind of like the information thing. It's like reality is made by that separation of the known from the knower, of the subject from the object. Like, that's what puts reality, that's how the game of reality is played. On the ultimate level, it's still oneness. But on this level where everything's played out, that's how it works. That's like that fundamental mechanism, is the realization of that distinction between subject and object, between observer and observed. But ultimately, it's an illusion. So let's actually talk about consciousness for a little bit. And as a psychonaut and as someone who's had a lot of psychedelic experiences, it's probably no surprise that I do believe consciousness is connected. All consciousness is connected. I think there's fundamentally only one consciousness. I believe in the oneness of consciousness and the oneness of mind. These ideas really resonate with the direct experiences I've had and the sort of intellectual game of piecing reality together through, all of my experiences and all the knowledge I've obtained. This is kind of just the view of reality that has emerged from that. I'm not even trying to. I hope that nobody thinks I'm trying to say that this is what reality is. Like, I'm not saying this is what reality is. This is just the perspective of reality, the model of reality that has emerged within my mind after all these experiences and after everything that I've studied throughout my life. So, yeah. I do believe we're all the same self. I believe I'm you and you're me. And I know that that might sound ridiculous, but hopefully it doesn't sound ridiculous to my audience, and you know what I mean. The same thing, and I don't want to use the word thing, but what animates my consciousness, or what animates my experience, what animates me is the same thing that animates you. It's all one. It's all the same fundamental self. And you're it. Like, you're it. That's why, another idea that I kind of believe in is like the universe has a holographic nature to it, in that the whole, or each part contains the whole. So each part contains the whole of everything. So that's why you can kind of tap into these experiences of complete oneness, complete interconnection with the entire cosmos, because it's real, because it really is in you. Because like a hologram, each part of the entire thing, each part of this grand universe contains this whole. And that's why there's this divine experience within us, because you are that oneness, you are that ultimate reality of you know, God, of the universe itself. Like, that's you. And I think this is what psychedelics, more than anything, have helped me realize. And you know, I don't think it's that far out there. I've been skeptical of my own ideas. I've been skeptical of my own experiences, and I've done the research. I've done the work outside of these experiences. More of the work is outside of the experiences than the experiences themselves, and you should know that. And yeah, this is what reality is to me. So I hope some of those ideas make sense to you. I probably didn't go complete. I'm probably not going to be satisfied completely with how I just explained my view of reality, but I hope I did a good enough job that I want to put this on YouTube and share some of these ideas with you. I'd love to know what you think about the nature of reality, and you'll see me in the next video.